Have you ever met somebody new and suddenly your whole identity, everything that you do, your schedule, your routines starts to revolve around them? You find yourself not being able to stop thinking about them, thinking about what they're doing, and you kind of fall away from yourself. I currently have been navigating this. And today I want to talk about the identity shift that happens here, coming back into balance and what that looks like, and understanding how to maintain who you are when you're in a new relationship. My name is Crystal Holman. I'm an intuitive identity coach, and I help people stay connected to themselves and reconnect to themselves as life changes and ebbs and flows, which is one of the only constants that life is. Let's talk about it. The universe works in the most mysterious ways sometimes. And there are so many different points in your life where things can change so abruptly and in such a wild way that you never saw coming. And I think that's part of the exciting piece of life, right? Is how fast things can shift and change, and how you could be living one way and then 3 weeks later be living a completely different one life way. And so, if you are one of my listeners and you've been listening to me or watching me for some period of time, you've definitely noticed that I went a little bit MIA in the last 3 weeks. And I've been going through my own identity shift. And I want to talk a little bit about that today. I want to talk about how in 3 weeks, my life and identity has shifted and changed, and in ways that I did not see coming. And that's the surprise of the universe, the surprise of life, the beautiful life that we are all living here. Previously to 3 weeks ago, I was doing a lot of work around self trust and confidence, and I'm still doing that work and how to reconnect with yourself. But what has changed for me is that I have met somebody, and now I'm learning how to remain connected to myself while in relationship with someone else. And I think that that's such a different level of work. It's such a different level of remaining connected to yourself. Previously to this relationship, I was alone for 5 or 6 years, not in relationship like romantically. I had friends, I was focused on my business, I was focused on my day to day, what I was doing on a regular basis, and really making sure that I was getting stuff done that felt fulfilling and good for me. But when you meet somebody new, and then you have to figure out how to rebalance your life. That's partially why I've been MIA for the last 3 weeks. And it's been this huge identity shift that I have had to navigate and move through and understand differently. And what I want to talk about today is how to stay connected to yourself when life be life and life be happening and things change, right? Because that's one of the constants always, is that life is constantly changing. Many of us don't like change, and I've definitely been a component of that, not enjoying the change that life has. But that is one thing that is consistent, is that life is always changing. And with every change and shift, there's also a shift in who we are, how we show up, how we present, how we make time for ourselves, right? What we enjoy doing. All of those things change and shift as well, which is why staying connected to yourself is a constant work in progress. It's a constant thing that you're working towards. It's a constant thing that you're having to check in around and do the work around and figure out. And when you are alone for a period of time, right? I've talked so much on this channel about the hermit journey, right? After a spiritual awakening, and how it's about reconnecting to yourself and learning to hear your own voice again and learning your standards and what you want out of life and, all of those different things, what you need. When you're alone and you're doing that work, it looks so different than when you are in connection with somebody else. The work feels so much easier when you're doing it by yourself. And so many of us get stuck in this way of doing things on our own, and we get comfortable in there. And then when someone else comes in and we have to kind of rebalance because it rocks our freaking world. It's difficult to find that balance again. It's difficult to find the time to reconnect with ourselves, to stay with ourselves, to figure out what we want, what we like. And as an ex people pleaser, right? People pleaser in recovery, whatever you want to call it, it's definitely a challenge to remain connected to your own voice when you start letting other people in and you start letting people come closer. And I think one of the things that has been a big identity shift for me, and I've been having to close out certain cycles around, is this fear that if I let somebody get close, then I'll lose myself again. I'm sure that's something that many of you can connect with, where you are good when you're on your own. You have your own time, you can spend your time however you want to, right? Like you find your balance when you're by yourself. But as soon as somebody else comes in and disrupts that, there's this fear that comes up for a lot of us around, oh my gosh, who am I in connection? Who am I when I'm not alone anymore? When I have to think about this other person, and now that's a part of the equation. And being able to stop and listen to your own inner voice and hold space for yourself while you're in connection with somebody else, it can be very triggering. It can be very overwhelming. It can be very scary. And one of the things that I've noticed, and I think this is actually something that is across the board for a lot of different people, especially if you've been a people pleaser, you have trauma, you've had unhealthy relationships, and then you meet somebody who's healthy, is this fear of, okay, if I let this person come close to me, am I still going to be able to be who I am? Am I still going to be able to hold space for myself? And that's a responsibility that we hold for ourselves. That's a responsibility that is ours, right? And learning how to communicate that we need certain time or we need certain space is really important. And I think that was probably one of the bigger challenges for me, was being able to find time to do the things that I needed to do to still be me, but in relationship. And so one of the things that's coming up for me as I'm saying this is that I have a morning routine that I do pretty regularly every morning, and it puts me in the right headspace. It puts me in a good space to be able to do work, be productive, get things done. It feels good. And this attachment that I created or have now was getting in the way of that. And a part of me was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to say anything, because what if they don't understand? What if this upsets them? What if they won't navigate this with me? Right. And, I've noticed this before through times of dating in my life where, I have a very strict like gym routine that I go and I do. Over the course of my life, I've always had like that kind of thing going on, and not letting somebody and the time that I want to spend with them interrupt that routine, right? And I find that sometimes it's easier to do that with some people than it is with others, for sure. But it's also important to be able to communicate that and have those conversations. I think the bigger fear is, am I going to disappoint this person or let them down? And, one thing that I've realized is that if we don't keep up with our routines, right, where we are staying connected to ourselves, we're doing the things that feel good for us, we fall into these patterns of letting that individual or person kind of take up all of that space. We start to feel like crap, or at least let me speak for myself. I start to feel like crap. And it's because I'm not doing what I need to do to take care of myself. And so being able to communicate that and have a conversation about that is so important. May that be that you go to the gym at a certain period of time or you have a certain morning routine, and letting them know that this is something that's important to me. I need to take care of this part of myself so that I can be there for you and I can be there for myself, right? I think that that was definitely one of the bigger challenges of trying to figure out, okay, like how do I embody this identity of trusting myself, connecting with myself, being with myself while still being in relationship with somebody else that feels safe and comfortable and is still me taking care of myself. And you know, there was definitely this back and forth I had within my own mind and my own feeling about like what was okay to say, what wasn't okay to say, right? And I waited a little while before I said anything. I honestly like got to the point where I felt like crap. And then I finally communicated it and it was fine. It was all okay. And I think the more that you are able to kind of show up for yourself and have those conversations and express those needs to other people and let them know that you need space, the more comfortable it becomes, especially when you have somebody who responds well to that, who is able to give you that space, who understands, right? And I think in relationship, it's really important that both of you kind of have those things. So it's also about, right, you being able to be okay with your partner or the other person having the things that they need to do to take care of themselves so you can also have those things. And so there's definitely this balance that comes. And one of the most important aspects of being able to maintain that balance, I believe, is open and clear and honest communication, which is why I do so much work around reclaiming your voice. But reclaiming your voice when you're in isolation compared to reclaiming your voice when you're in a relationship with someone else, that's very, very different. And you're working very different skills and very different muscles that maybe you hadn't worked in a while, just like I kind of ran into, right? And it's interesting too, because when you first meet somebody, right, you kind of get caught up in the whirlwind a little bit, like the excitement of like, oh, I finally like met this person, they're wonderful, right? And a lot of the times I think we get lost in that. We get excited, we get kind of blown away in it. And it's about being able to come back to that center. It's about being able to come back to ourselves. And I know for myself, I can be very hard on myself and very critical at times. And so when I did get blown away and I lost that connection to myself, I can be tough, beating myself up. What's wrong with you? Why can't you do this? Right. And I think it's more so about learning how to be gentle and kind and loving with yourself through that. It's normal. It's normal to be blown away by certain life transitions, life changes, certain things that happen that kind of come out of nowhere. It's normal to be blown away by those things. And it's about recognizing it. And when you do recognizing it, not beating the crap out of yourself, not letting yourself shame spiral, not letting yourself, beat yourself up for doing that, but then asking yourself, okay, I've recognized it now. I've become aware of it. Now, what do I need to do to get back into balance? What does that actually look like? And specifically for what I'm talking about today, right? It was about me being able to communicate that I had a morning routine, that I needed to maintain that, and that we would have to work around that. And that was about me being able to reconnect with myself and come back to myself so that I could be in a better balance with this new thing that was coming in. And when I talk about identity work, which is a lot of what I do, this is an identity shift. It's a shift in the way that I am doing things on a day to day basis, the way that I'm showing up on a day to day basis. But the part around how we get blown away sometimes in these relationships or we get off track, right? When you meet somebody, everything else kind of goes to the back burner. At least that's how it's been for me and many of my relationships over the course of my life. And one of the things that I'm learning is how do I stay with myself and also still work on what I'm working on, still be consistent, still show up, right? But also be excited about this thing and hold space for it, you know? And I think that that's like a constant work in progress, kind of how I started this today. It's a constant needing to find balance. It's a constant needing to check in with yourself and ask yourself, did I do those things this week? What is it that I need to shift to be able to maintain those things? Was I in good balance, right? We think that like once we find balance or once we figure out kind of how to maintain certain things, that that's just going to be congruent and keep going and be straightforward, but that's just not the case because life is constantly changing. That's one constant. And so it's about kind of continuing to check in with yourself on a regular basis. And this is exactly what I do in my program. This is exactly what I do with my clients in coaching is, it's that constant needing to take the time, slow down enough, check in with yourself, ask yourself how you're doing, and ask yourself what you need to be able to get back into balance if you're out of balance. That's a constant thing. And I talk about this all the time when it comes to the work that I do with clients because it's so easy to fall out of balance because something happens. And it's much harder to get back into balance, to maintain balance, to figure out what you need to do so, right? And so I guess what I'm trying to get at today is that if you have been feeling like you have been out of balance or that you've lost your balance, it's normal. I want to normalize it. I want you to understand that that's a part of life. And staying in balance and staying connected to yourself is a constant thing that you're doing all the time. And when you have certain ways that you do that in place, certain things that you do on a regular basis to check in with yourself around that, you're going to be more successful at being able to get back into balance a lot quicker, right? To be able to realize what it is that you need to be in balance, to be able to still show up for yourself, to be able to still connect with yourself and not let these things kind of take you for a ride to the point where you, just lose yourself. And I think, especially in love connections, it's really hard to keep that balance. It's really hard to not lose yourself, especially in the beginning. And I think that that's completely normal. But there's a recalibration that needs to occur. There's a shifting that needs to happen. And this is an identity shift that you need to be able to embody and take on and move through to be able to find that balance again. And so when it comes down to life, everything is always changing all the time. And so always ask yourself, am I in balance? Take that time on a regular basis to ask yourself, sit with yourself, acknowledge that. And I hope that you can be gentle and kind with yourself as you are trying to come back into balance, because that is something that is going to be consistent and always shifting and changing. And the kinder and gentler you can be with yourself about the idea that you fell out of balance and you just need to figure out that new normal, right? That new identity, that new normal, the more gentle and kind you can be with yourself, the easier it is for you to get back on track, the easier it is for you to continue to move forward. And so, if you recognize yourself in this today, I want you to know that it's okay to fall out of balance. If you need help with this is exactly what I do. You can find out more information at crystalclearmystic.com. And just know that this is normal and it's a constant work. And it's about learning certain tools and routines to be able to set yourself up for success so that you can actually be able to navigate these things and make sure that you're coming back towards yourself and to yourself. Because that's not only going to benefit you, that's going to benefit everybody else around you.